to attain or that you're growing towards. And I think each of us can, agree on that. But if you don't, well, then we'll work towards that. But why are we here today? Acquisition IQ, like I said earlier today, is just, we're a premier network of investors, entrepreneurs, and in M&A service providers. And as a part of that group, we have an online as well as an in-person conference, which is the Acquisition Conference, where, again, we provide education, experience, all around the topics of buying, selling, and funding your business. So, again, relational development is huge for us, and that's why we do things like that right out there of creating an environment of support. And it's not just about the business that you're creating. Again, it's about the environment and culture that has been established. We want to say thank you to all of our sponsors, partners, people that have helped. The SBDC, of course, today. Thank you so much, Brianna. You did a wonderful job helping with the promotion as well as connecting with others here. We've got Castle Solutions, now CFO. Some of these brands are nationwide brands, as well as here we have AIA, and then we've got Anomalous Creative, which is our media marketing team that's working behind the scenes right now with our live stream. Brianna, I know you already talked earlier today. We do have a QR code if you guys are interested to learn more about the SBDC. It seems like a lot of people here in here are already a part of that, so I don't think that's as relevant. But we did the icebreaker. Problems that we're looking at, and we see there's a lack of education, and also it is our goal to increase the understanding of, again, how to fund a company, how to buy a company. And the reason why we did that is because, one, I had a conversation with an investment banker. I don't know if you guys have ever talked with investment bankers, but he shared with me a story about many companies that are coming to him wondering about how they can be banked, or at least funded. And I started to dig deeper and ask him more questions about multiple arbitrage and roll-up theory and all these different things that you can do as a business owner to grow your company other than just building it through your widgets or products or services. And that is what, in essence, built the brand of Acquisition Conference and Acquisition IQ, because we're bridging the gap, because we're seeing, in essence, a lack of education there, because we have a lot of small businesses that are being purchased as well as small businesses that are being sold, and that is going to be more and more in the future. And then building trust in teams. So where we are today, we've got our national tour. We're technically on a 15-city national tour right now. It's my wife and I, and we've been in different cities meeting different founders and entrepreneurs to create this network. And currently we're excited to be able to do so because we're meeting a lot of people that, we're matching capital with the product or with the service. And then we're also, matching the relationships, which we're seeing. Then we have our national conference, like I was saying, on September 3rd. And we're excited about that. So like I said, we're going to be talking a little bit more about leadership and the ways that you guys can work together and how important that really can be. So I'm going to kick it right over to Michael Hayden. And thank you so much for being here today.
All right, thank you, man. Well, as Nate said, my name is Michael Hayden. I spent a few years, 20 plus, in the Marine Corps, United States Marine Corps, hoorah.
Keep it off.
My honor, thank you. Serving people like you guys in this great community in San Diego, and the growth and communal prosperity is really what it's all about. I've led some different acquisitions and mergers through the Marine Corps. I'm going through one right now at the university from a for-profit to a nonprofit, so that has a lot of dark edges on it and a lot of different things moving along. I'm really here today just to sort of help host this and the location, and hope that everyone really enjoys the community and the growth that Nate and Lacey and this network that they're putting together for AIQ. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself in a minute. I'd like to talk about myself, promise you. But for right now, I just want to talk a little bit more about what it takes for like a framework. I had a mentor one time here at UC right across the road. Actually, this is sort of a full circle, Nate. We were here, but this isn't the first place. We were over catty corner over at the Rady School. Mm-hmm. I was working with the X Prize, and Nate came to one of our events where we hosted. We had 90 investors and 10 teams, 3D metal printed rocket engines. That was 10 years ago today, I think. But there was an X Prize competition, sort of a preview of Peter Diamant's video called, let's see, it was, oh shoot, I'm trying to remember. Do you remember the name of the video?
No.
Okay, well, Peter Diamant created this, it was a documentary film about creating the X Prizes, the X Prize, and it's actually on Netflix, I think. But it's a beautiful. I'm just drawing a blank. I'm really not prepared to do any speeches today. I've been. Leadership series that I was putting together. I graduated across the road, and really just trying to open up the opportunities for the development and the hedging of different information that you could potentially have to support this community. San Diego and Nate, I think you're nationwide now, and but Nate came to this event. And it was really fun. And we ended up becoming very good friends, and I got to meet Miss Lacey, and I'm sort of like, we're besties, right? Yeah. And so I've been up to their place, and they've been to my place, and a lot of history with Nate and his at Maple Syrup Farm, going up to Michigan. I think, Alan, you're from Michigan as well, right? Yeah. And a lot of synergies and a lot of communal growth and connections and network. And that's really what this is about. So for me, it's really supporting veterans. So and I ran a little incubator accelerator called Veteran Ventures. We had a lot of different veterans. As a matter of fact, there's a couple of them here that I haven't seen since about 2016, I think. And but it's really looking at the opportunities and leadership capabilities of military have a high probability of being on time and supporting and being leaders as well as followers, as well as this is a big community of military people. So there's a lot of advantages just to consider as opportunity for growth in your businesses or in the future. My guiding light here was, again, this thing, mentor and a good friend, and I really cared about this person. She talked about this bottom line, but not a bottom line of just profit. It's a triple bottom line. And now I got five things, 5 P's. 3 P's were people, planet, profit, and sort of in that order. And I like to add in purpose, and that purpose, just like the military, where we have a purpose, and you want to give your people a purpose, or have a purpose yourself for your business growth. And I think that just sort of ties into what networking and connecting with people is about. And then the 5th P, because I thought of this on the way over, I had to write it down, but that's sort of preparation and being prepared. And And just like I started my company after I was in the Marine Corps for so many years. I think in 1999, me and a friend of mine won a hackathon, and we got some servers and just started to develop our skills about tools that are in the internet and data. And we started building websites. We were actually in competition with this company called GoDaddy, if you ever heard of them. But back then I wasn't this marketing genius guru I am today. I would, I really would have taken a GoDaddy truck and blown it up and said go ho or don't go at all. But that was gun ho domains. It was all to start veterans transitioning. What are you going to do when you get out? And most people would say, well, I don't know, or I might go bang some nails or work for my cousin. And so this idea of finding your purpose, finding a goal, finding what you love and what you aspire to do was way more powerful than just these veterans just walking out the door and maybe going to school or maybe not even using their GI Bill or maybe taking a darker path and becoming an alcoholic. I used to work and teach down at the Veterans Center just a couple years ago, right before COVID. We actually had veterans that were going through this thing called Veterans IT, Veteran Ventures IT. So we sponsored about 30 veterans in that, and they were actually getting certified and really advanced, even more so than my college students, because they had that dedication. And once they find their purpose and you support that, they really will take off if you give them the opportunity. But yeah, this idea of where I'm at now, my programs are ranked high. My bachelor's in business information system is ranked number 3 by Tech Magazine. You can't buy that. And our master's is ranked just above MIT at number 2 at the university. So that's pretty good. So I'm doing that and coaching and still helping develop teams. I started the basement with some friends, Jeff Belk and a few other people, and really pushed that forward, which I don't know if there's a couple people say they're members of the basement right now. And that is now a $85 million innovation center, which the basement was in the Mandeville complex. And that was a big jump from nothing from entrepreneurship back in the days. It was me standing on a little box trying to get people to understand what entrepreneurship was back when I was in college and running these programs. So we, as students, raised $100,000 and just really developed companies. And now the valuation of the companies from that org where I was the CEO, as a student developing and giving out advice on company development and entity development, whether it's an LLC or any other type of entity. Now we've got so many. You've got the trusts, and, but I'm not a lawyer, but you can kind of figure out the difference between all of those entities, and some of them are nonprofits. Like I said, that's a great way to go. I think one of the things I learned at UCSD was to really look at the opportunity for employee ownership models. So you give someone a part of your company and then it develops, and there's a big 30% tax bracket. So employee ownership, there's an institute across the way at UC. I learned a lot there. And again, my marketing skills about blowing up the competition was something I learned there. I had to. But in all reality, just to say, with the idea of the network that we're growing into and the development of our community, it's great that Nate and Lacey are expanding this to global pretty soon. Is that right, Nate?
Yeah.
It'll be a global network, and so that's another aspect. Is a lot of military have that. They've been around the world. They've seen some things. I've been to about 30 countries myself. I want to wrap it up. I want to respect everybody's time, but really give the opportunity to one. My ask is that you consider veterans, and 2, I'm building some apartments. If anybody knows a veteran that might be, or anyone knows a project manager, site manager, if they're a CD, even better, if you know what that is. But being prepared, making sure that, just like in the military, you want to inspect everything before you start, lay it out. We do these things called JOBs, junk on the bunks, and that's really just making sure that before you get into something, you don't expect, you inspect, and making sure that you're prepared for what your next is. So, welcome everyone. Thank you, Nate, for starting this. And that's all I have. Just wanted to say hi.
sometimes in business, yeah, good to see you. Feel free, just take a seat right here.
The ubiquitous mobile phone, you know?
Right.
It's on silent, but it's there.
So
You getting what you need, Lace? Okay.
I'm excited to be able to interview you. You know, we've got obviously a lot of people that out there that. Yeah. See, I told you it's not going to be perfect, but we're going to keep rolling. Let's go. Yeah, exactly. Come on now.
Perfect truly is the enemy of the good.
You know, it is.
Yeah.
You know, let's just hop right into that. So what is imperfection and how has that created the success that you have had today in your life?
Well, if everything was perfect, we wouldn't want to move on to the next thing, right?
So true.
So we need imperfection in order to get better. And I said this thing was on silent. I lied. Okay. You need imperfection in order to find something to chase. I mean, if everything were perfect, if everything was given to you. Look, I have a story. It's a very personal story, but it's kind of a funny story about chasing things that are perfect and things that aren't. When my brother, who was 2.5 years older than I was, graduated from high school back in the day, I'm going to date myself here, my father bought him a Firebird 400 with a 4-speed Hurst shifters and Krager mags and all the ball of wax, for those of you who understand anything about cars. It was extraordinary. And that was terrific. And I said, gee, this bodes well for me. I'm going to graduate in 2.5 years, and I don't know, I'm thinking about a Cougar XR7. Anyway, I dreamt about this car, and I graduated high school, and it was summer, and I'm going, nothing. So finally it got to be August, and I'm thinking, okay, I guess I need to push this boulder uphill a little bit. And I went to my dad and I said, so where's my car? And he said, well, yeah, about that. Tell you what, let's talk Wednesday. So I said, okay. Along comes Wednesday, and I'm hanging out. My dad comes home from his office, and he says, okay, come on, we're going for a drive. And we drove up to this large store that in those days was like one of the first superstores, big, large grocery store with a pharmacy attached and all the rest of it. And he introduced me to this guy, Robert Smith, and who interviewed me and ultimately gave me a job as a pack boy. And my father said, and if you do really well, you might become a cashier and you can work part-time all year. And I said, what does this have to do with my Cougar? And he said, well, we need to talk about that. And I said, okay, what does that mean? He said, let's go to the car. We went to the car, we sat in the car in the parking lot, and I was pretty steamed. And he said, you're pretty annoyed with me, aren't you? And I said, yeah, of course I'm annoyed with you. Like, my brother gets everything, and it's my turn, and I get nothing. And he said, as you well know, one of my favorite people in the world is Winston Churchill. And he quoted Winston Churchill like it was a bag of M&Ms. Every M&M had a quote, and it was always Winston Churchill. I didn't realize that he'd met him during his time in the Navy, which was kind of interesting. And he said, well, one of Mr. Churchill's favorite expressions is, we're about to have a conversation we didn't have. I said, what does that mean? He said, we're going to have a talk, and you're never going to talk about it after we have the talk. And I said, okay. And he said, between you and I, your brother is an asshole, isn't he? Now, I just graduated high school, and my brother and I don't exactly get along. And I said, well, yeah, I know that, but how do you know that? And he said, look, I made some mistakes with your brother. I gave him everything, and look how he turned out. I don't want that for you. He said, what I know from my own experiences is the things you work for, the things you struggle for, the things you fuss over, the things you almost get and lose are the things that propel you to the things that are beyond what you want. He said, it's nice to want, but it's so much more productive to achieve. I could give you a car, assuage my guilty conscience for treating him perhaps differently than I treated you. But trust me, the gift I'm giving you is far greater than the gift I gave your brother. And to this very day, my brother's had modest success in his life, but he's never really achieved greatness. And I'm not suggesting I have achieved greatness, but I have achieved great things with the help of friends, relatives, neighbors, teams, employees, and community. But I think what I've achieved perhaps that is even more important out of all of this is a sense of peace about the things that I've accomplished. Because I can honestly sit here and say nobody gave me anything that I didn't in some way, shape, or form work for, either by contributions to a community or to my employees. And those are the things that are important. And I think that imperfection is the catalyst for chasing the perfection that I hope you never achieve. Thank you. I've been waiting for validation for that for 75 years.
We're here all night.
This is that's incredible. Really, it's just. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. I did eventually. My first car was a '56 Ford, and it was a clunker. But you know what? It was so cool. Yeah.
Something is probably, you've probably heard the term delayed gratification, correct?
Of course.
Because it's something that we all strive for, and I just did a video earlier today about it is not glamorous on the way to the top of a mountain. It's really glamorous when you get to the top and you're able to see the view, right? But it's the grit, and it's one step at a time. So share with us a little bit about how you've installed that into the culture of the companies that you have ran and how that translates to bottom line.
I don't know that you can instill a culture. I think you can lead your way to a culture. And I think the only way you can do that is to, one, sort out who you are. What's important to you? What are your priorities? And I can tell you that in the first company I owned, I was a screamer. I yelled at everybody. You will do what and then you get to learn that the real key to culture starts with one word and it ends with the same word: respect. You need to respect everybody that works with you as much as you respect yourself. And if you look around and find out that you're not getting respect in return, it's because you're not giving it. And if you're not giving it, the guy you got to go talk to, or the woman you got to go talk to, is the one in the mirror. At the end of the day, culture is created by how you behave. And there's no magic here, folks. Your rewards in life are going to be in direct proportion to the amount of service you provide to your fellow man. And that doesn't mean selling a better product. That means treating your fellow man, again, with respect and with dignity, and giving them the opportunity to rise up. I've been chief executive of the company I'm currently running As a matter of fact, coincidentally, it was 10 years last Thursday. I've less than 1% turnover of our staff. And it's not because we pay the best, because we don't. We're a nonprofit. We pay nonprofit wages. But what I can do is educate them. So during my tenure, I've created 3 MBAs, 2 MPAs, policy, Masters of Policy. I've sent dozens of our employees off to places like Duke or Harvard for executive education, things they never ever thought they would ever have the opportunity to be exposed to. And what am I doing? I'm creating portable skills that they can take with them when they leave. But they don't leave. Whether it's gratitude or because they want to put back to work the things that they learn. So I go back to respect. Respect the people that work with you. Respect your suppliers, your vendors, your clients, your customers. Look, there's one book I've read a dozen books, and I've probably given away hundreds and hundreds of books. If I like a book, I call up the publisher, I get a case of them, and I give them away. The one book you should read is a book called The Gratitude Diaries by Janice Kaplan. You can get it on Amazon in paperback, I think, for $3. And don't read it once. And don't read it twice. Just keep reading it. Every time things aren't going well, sit down and pick a chapter out. Because gratitude, respect, these are the things that create character. Character creates leadership. Leadership creates culture. And without a good, positive culture, you might make some money, but you're never going to find peace. You're never going to find what you might define as success. Because if you think success is a bag of money, I will tell you that's a crock of crap. I can tell you that 1982, it's a Sunday morning, I forget the month, I'm at the corner of Ventura Boulevard and Van Nuys Boulevard in my white Porsche 911 with literally a brown bag full of cash on the passenger seat. And I'm thinking to myself, what are you doing? You've just blown the second marriage, and you're going to brunch with a bag of money. That's not success. The money comes from the service you provide to your community, from the service you provide to your employees, to the service you provide to your customers or your donors if you're in a nonprofit, or the service that you provide. Accomplishment is about doing things. To the doers go the doing. And that's what life is about, right? It's about again and again and again for the realization of again and again. We can talk about business all day long. You know, I think I'm on my 24th acquisition or disposition. I've done a couple of public exits. I've done a couple of, RTOs, reverse takeovers, one IPO. And they're all fun, and they really are, and it's terrific. But at the end of the day, I currently run an organization that services 11,000 nonprofits across the country, from Red Cross to the smallest, 3-person animal rescue organization. And what gives me the greatest pleasure in life is watching the success unfold in the community and the value that you create in the community. So this conversation can take one of a couple of different directions, Nathan, but you and I are both relatively spiritual people. I don't ask anybody to believe in anything they don't. I personally have a great deal of faith in our Creator. And whether the Creator exists in our minds or in reality, we need something bigger than ourselves to aspire to. Why do we have churches? Why do we have synagogues? Why do we have mosques? Why do we want religion in our home? Because you have to have something greater than yourself to teach reverence. And that's where respect comes from, is understanding reverence.
I think it's interesting you're talking about, the servant-based initiatives, a servant-based heart in somebody's, or in an organization, and how that can seep from leadership down. Can you give some of the audience here some insight as to how you've structured culturally around a service-based environment that can truly transform really the valuation of a company upon an exit, but how have you structured that?
I think it's different for every organization. It depends on the industry, depends on the business, it depends on what the norm is in that arena. I can tell you that you'll get more for a business when you allow people to come in and talk with your employees, when you're not afraid to share with your employees what you're doing, and you shouldn't be, and when they understand the value of the culture that they have. It also, hopefully inspires them not necessarily to change, not how they operate, but how they deal with people. I think also if you're a responsible business leader, and I know this will sound silly, and it's easy to say this in retrospect. Now I can tell you that my first disposition, I was as much of a dick, pardon me, as anybody else. I just went for the bucks, right? And then people started leaving that company, and they were unhappy, and they started coming around saying, what are you doing next, and so on. And I began to realize the value of the team. And a good team will create greater value. I don't know that I can articulate how that translates into additional prosperity in the sale or the disposition of your business. But I can tell you that you'll get a greater price for your business because of what your consumer thinks of your business and how they talk about your business. And so when somebody is, sniffing around your operation, they're going to talk to the people, that you serve. Whether you know it or not. They might not tell you. They might say, well, give me some references. But at the end of the day, they're going to know what your customer thinks of you. They're going to find out if they've got a nickel worth of brain. And I want my customers to say, these guys are amazing, and I'm happy to stay with you provided you give me the same level of service and the same level of integrity. And while we're on the subject of integrity, if you are not prepared to walk up the middle of the road, don't walk the road. At the end of the day, I hate to sound like Perry Mason, but that's my vintage. The truth will out. And if you are an honest broker, people know it. And if you're a dishonest broker, they know that too. No matter what you think you know or what you think they know. You probably all think you're the most intuitive person in the room, and you can see things about people that they can't see. Hey folks, we're all intuitive. It was a gift given to us by the Creator. People know when you're honest, and people know when you're not. And it's a tougher road. And I am fortunate. I'm married to a woman now for 38 years, and I still like the girl. Hey, in my circle, that's a big deal. And she constantly reminds me, and by the way, talking about military, she's the daughter of a third-generation West Pointer. And constantly reminds me, and constantly reminds our children that you must in life take the harder right for the lesser wrong. You can't take the easier road. There's no easy road. You want to be successful, there's no easy road.
That's good. That's good. You guys enjoying it? Yeah.
So I hadn't expected this to be a master class in values, but the truth is, you can't separate who you are from what you do. And if it's your business, then it's your fingerprint, it's your culture, it's your character that's on display every day. And every day isn't going to be easy, and what gets you through the tough days. And another story. And when it gets boring, you say it's boring, stop. Right on the cusp of going from being, a small business operator to the giant leap, from when I had to go from being on the gut to the gauge. Because every business goes from being an intuitive operation to being too big to manage intuitively. Becomes counterintuitive. And if you don't go from the gut to the gauge, you're going to fail. It's just the way it is. Things get so big, so unruly, you've got to use the data. And that takes a completely mindset. And those of you who maybe have a pilot in your family, or you are a pilot, it's It's literally from going from VFR to IFR. You got to believe the instruments. And that in itself is very difficult. So I was running this small advertising communication agency. We were doing okay, kind of. And then, the sort of first major recession that we had to deal with. And we had to decide who we were going to keep as clients and who we weren't. The ones we thought weren't going to be able to pay had to go, right? And the ones we thought might survive, and so on. But during that process, I started out to buy another company. The company's name was PPL, and they had one customer, and their customer was the Ford Motor Company. The guy who was operating the company was an ex-Ford employee, and he had passed away. Ernst & Young was running the company. They were having a hard time buying it because they said, well, it was a one-guy company. I mean, they were doing a lot of business, but it was really about the relationship. Nobody's ever going to be able to convert it. And all I could do was smell opportunity, right? So I did some research. They were dealing with 4 different divisions of Ford. One division didn't talk to the other. If you lost one, you'd always have another, and so on. Anyway, it doesn't matter how I, prepared to buy the business. Took me 9 months. Ultimately, I finally saw that the guys at Ernst & Young didn't want to sell this thing because they were operating it. They were getting a free lunch. So I went up to see the widow. And at 8:30 in the morning, I sat down at her kitchen table to have a conversation with her. She said, tea? I said, yes, please. And she said, I have my own brand of tea. I said, that's fine. Poured it out of the pot. It was straight gin. I'm not a gin drinker. I'm sorry. I can't even stand the smell of the stuff. I'm not a teetotaler. I drink, but not gin. Anyway, I thought, you're going to drink this? No, I'm not. Yes, I am. I drank it. And anyway, ended up with the business. But here's the deal. This is the crux of it. We were having a hard time with our little agency. On the day I went to the lawyer's office and signed the deal and got that business, I went back to my office and the door was padlocked because we couldn't pay the rent. PPL went on to be a $130 million enterprise. We took it public. We became one of the 10 most actively traded on the Toronto Stock Exchange. Grew into a company called Microform. I did 11 acquisitions in 13 months, raised over $60 million in the public markets through TD Waterhouse. So the other part of this story is never give up. Don't ever, ever, ever give up. It's not about chasing dreams. It's about chasing your own truth. And I think we're about out of time. I see Lacey running around here. So.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Well, I'd like to open up. We got 5 minutes for Q&A, for Howard. And, obviously some of the things we'll listen to tonight is more tactical in nature. We have somebody else that's going to deliver upon your exit, tax strategy and whatnot. But I wanted to also bring a human element, to what you brought today as well. And I think that's extremely important because humans buy humans. We talked about that earlier. And so anyone has any questions for Howard about his past right here?
So, I feel like...
Well, hang on. Who are you?
Yeah.
My name is Brianna Weisinger.
Hi, Brianna.
I feel like you're being really open and honest here, so I'm going to ask you a question that a lot of people don't.
No, I've never been to jail, but thank you for asking.
That gets right into the right category. In business, what was your biggest failure that you experienced, and how did you recover from that, both psychologically and obviously from the business aspect?
Interesting you asked about the biggest. There were several. But I'm kind of like, was it Edison that said, I didn't fail, I just found 2,000 ways not to make a light bulb? Yes. Yeah. Well, thanks for the question. I think There were a lot. I had a I had a business selling cosmetics door to door. I had about 100. I had about 100 girls, 125 girls, knocking on doors selling cosmetics, and I was making big money. I was 21 years of age. I'd made over $1 million by the time I was like 21 in a few months. By the time I was 23, every penny of it was gone. Why was it a failure? Arrogance. The belief it would go on forever without my actually doing any work. Commanding the ship and not doing the work that I did to get there. And the reason I say that was the biggest failure is it wasn't the biggest economic failure, but it was the biggest psychological failure, and it was the one, I think, where I recognized you can't eat your own dog food, if that makes sense to any of you. You can't believe your own press. You can get on LinkedIn and tout all your victories and all that crap, but let me tell you something. At the end of the day, you're back down to the simplest things. It's service. I remember walking into what was then a Datsun dealer in the Datsun 240Zs, which became the Nissan 300 SXs, whatever they are. Had just come out, and I said, well, I've opened a branch in Halifax. I was living in Toronto at the time, and I said, if you can have 2 of these with the same key, one delivered in Halifax by the weekend, I'll buy 2. I liked having my clothes made, so I'd walked into this tailor, Sagan Tats, and I wanted to get on the airplane, go to the next city, and not have to carry a suitcase. After all, I'm the great. Don't buy your own bullshit, pardon which. Humility is a very important tool. So I would say my biggest failure was in my character, not in the business. If that helps. Thank you for asking. Keeps me honest. Yes, sir.
Hey, how's it going? I'm over here with Josh from Puerto Jovan over here at Rain Capital. When you said that, obviously culture and respect and all that good stuff, but when you're looking to hire, how do you differentiate between people that you're just trying to onboard and obviously it's a performance-based business. How do you deal with something like that when people don't move on?
Well, things are a little different for me now. We've got a pretty large HR department and so on, so I don't necessarily talk to everybody unless they're going to be sort of interacting with the C-suite. But in the day when I did